Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Lucas Oil and TireRack.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb, and welcome everyone to MotorWeek podcast number 265. I'm John Davis, and I have Greg and Jessica from our MotorWeek staff today, and we're going to talk about all things EV, electric vehicles. MotorWeek just finished its EV, the State of Charge, all-electric special, and we're sort of following up with it this podcast. We're going to particularly be interested in electric vehicles that have a plug, so full electrics that are battery electric, and also we might talk a little bit about some plug-in hybrids, PHEVs. We had a great time doing the program. We looked basically at what you could buy right now and in the very near future. And that really brings us to the first vehicle we're going to cover today, the 2022 Volvo C40 Recharge. And Jessica Ray, you are fresh back from having a chance to drive it. Tell us what the C40 Recharge is and what you thought about it.
Yeah, so the C40 Recharge, if you take a look at it, you're probably gonna think it looks a lot like the XC40 Recharge, or just all XC40s in general. And well, that's because there's quite a lot of shared parts with the XC40. It's the same CMA platform that the XC40 Recharge is built on, but also the Polestar 2 is built on. So we're talking the powertrain is identical. It has the twin motor setup, one in the front, one in the rear, both of them 150 kilowatts of output.
This is Jessica, but sure. This is a coupe, right?
Yes, sorry. Yes. So this is a coupe. The biggest difference.
Well, coupe, describe what they mean by coupe. I don't think people are seeing the air quotations.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So coupe being, it has a sloping roof line to it. It's pretty significant if you take a look in the rear. I mean, it's clearly less headroom for folks sitting in the back. And there also is less visibility due to its sloping roof line because you have a much smaller rear window, but it still has those the tail lights that go up the edges of the rear, and it's very attractive looking with that sloping roof line. I mean, I do enjoy the boxy look to the XC40 Recharge, but there is something really sleek about that sloping roof line. Otherwise, I mean, it shares quite a bit with the XC40.
I want to clear up one more thing. We all know that Europeans, when they use the term coupe, that usually means a 4 or 5 door vehicle still. Now, this is not a traditional 2-door coupe, is it?
No. It's still got your 4 doors. It's a subcompact crossover that has a sloping roof line.
Okay.
It's very interesting. They definitely avoided the word coupe because I drove it in Europe. I was in Belgium because they will be building the C40s in Ghent, in their production factory there. And so yes, they avoided the word coupe.
But we all know that's what they look like with the, so really it's a fastback version of the XC40 Recharge for all practical purposes.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Americans probably think of it as like a fastback, sportback type look.
Yes, because you do think you're like, all right, the powertrain is very shared. The front end is very shared with the XC40. We're talking the same 402 horsepower. It's got a 78 kilowatt hour battery, and it uses with usable 75 kilowatt hours, which is obviously a good thing because it always varies of how big the battery is, but then also how much automakers want to make that usable. But everything, there's a lot of shared elements with it. So you're trying to think, well, why did you do that? And it's, well, because you can, and it looks cool and it's sporty, and the C40 will actually only be ever electric. They will never put a combustion engine into it. And so this new thing that Volvo is also doing is that you can actually only buy it online. You cannot go to a dealership to buy it. You have to order it online. Now you can test drive one at a dealership, and you can get your service done at a dealership, and you'll pick it up at a dealership, but you have to order it online.
That's causing a lot of consternation among Volvo dealers. I can tell you that.
Yes,
Range,
yeah.
what's the range of it, and how does that compare to the XC40?
So range currently, they don't have EPA numbers out yet, but they are estimating it to be 225 miles, which is on the lower end of the spectrum, but it's still respectable and honestly what most people would use. Driving wise, I mean, I loved it. I had so much fun in it. It was, I mean, that 402 horsepower on this little subcompact crossover, you don't get that much power in that size of a vehicle, or that type of a vehicle otherwise. And of course, the instant power was just, I had a blast driving it on the highway. It was so fun. And they actually put us in situations where we were driving in a lot of high traffic areas in Belgium. And just having that instant torque to just sort of pop in and out of traffic when you need to was so nice. Like I can imagine city driving is really, really enjoyable with it. So, yeah.
Greg, any questions for Jessica? You can look at, everybody can't see her face like we can. And she has a big smile on it. So you can tell she really enjoyed it.
Yes. So back to the whole range thing, 225 miles, doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually the same as our Porsche Taycan rear wheel drive. The base level we have in right now is a long-term vehicle. And I mean, I wouldn't compare these two cars. My point was the C40 is more of a city car. I mean, that's urban oriented car, in which case 225 miles is more than enough. I do find it kind of weird that they would take a car like that and like put 400 horsepower in it. Like to me, that doesn't make a ton of sense. Like I love it. Don't get me wrong. I'll take more horsepower, but I'm just not sure why this car has to have that much horsepower. It's just my interesting thought of the day.
I think eventually, well, obviously they couldn't confirm anything to me, but I imagine we have a single motor Polestar 2 now. I imagine a single motor, longer range version of the C40 could be in the future that would have less horsepower, would sort of make sense for most people. Why they're starting with the what they're calling the twin motor, I don't know, because now we have a single motor. And of course, Volvo doesn't like to talk about what Polestar's dealings are and vice versa. So, I definitely see where you're coming from, Greg.
Yeah, but for the US, if you don't have all-wheel drive, it's almost a non-starter. So they've come out with their top model first, and like Greg mentioned, they'll trickle down to something less. And actually, let's stay on that the Porsche that we've got in for our long term. We were going to talk about that, and since you brought it up, Greg, it's the base model Taycan. It's only rear wheel drive with motor in the rear, like all good Porsches should have, I guess. And I think all of us on the staff that have had a chance to spend time on it have been really smitten with this car. It's still not inexpensive, but why don't you tell everybody a little bit more about it and why you like it? Because I know you do.
No, it is not inexpensive. So if you're expecting a base level Porsche to become within range of most people, it's just not going to happen. I think it starts at like 75. The one we have is up around 114, 112, $112,000, that is. And that's part of that is because it does have the upgraded battery. I think the base level has like a mid 70s kilowatt hour battery. This one is 93-ish kilowatt hours. I know they say specifically like 92.3 or 92.8. Regardless, 225 miles of range. And what sticks out to me is with most Porsches, performance is like right there at the forefront. That's the first thing you usually notice, regardless of the Porsche you're driving. And this one, I thought it kind of took a back seat to the luxury and the comfort of the car, because I drove it on 2 hour and 15-minute drives on the highway, mostly highway. And it was just so smooth. And I think more importantly, quiet. And John, I know you had some highway time in it.
I absolutely love the car, and everything you've said, I completely agree with. But when I took it over to a friend of ours who is a dyed-in-the-wool Porsche-phile, he asked me why I liked it. And I said, well, first of all, it actually is within, at $115,000, that's a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but we're seeing Jeeps with $100,000 price tag these days. So it's not as crazy as it would have been 5 years ago. But with that said, the car didn't seem lacking in anything, even though it was far from their top model. It was so smooth. But my friend said he drove it and he thought it was a nice car, but he said, why do you like it? And I said, I like it because I can't put my finger on it completely. Maybe it's the fact that it's the rear weight bias of the engine in the back. I don't know. It felt like the essence of Porsche was maintained. And I know we've said that with the more expensive all-wheel drive models, but this car, I would have expecting it to lose some allure, and it didn't. If anything, the lower price made me want it even more because it was actually almost attainable. My spouse, we took a considerable ride in it, several hours, very comfortable. They took the same kind of center stack that they use in the Panamera, but it made it all digital. I just thought they did a superb job in it. And I have to tell you, it's a car that I'm going to be looking at the used car ads in about 3 years as they start popping up, because I think at that point it'll be a lot more attainable than it is now. And it could end up being really a sleeper. It was just very, very slick and very impressive, very precise.
Yeah, I don't want to make the whole podcast about it, but my last few points will be, I was able to fit 2 kids in the back, a 3-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. And it wasn't the best fit, but they got back there, and my 2.5-year-old daughter absolutely loves it. She actually is starting to realize the difference between cars, so she knows when I have a Porsche or when I have this or that. And normally when I say, well, wait, we have a Porsche, she goes, vroom, 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 vroom. And I had to, unfortunately, tell her that this Porsche does not make that noise. So it didn't really dampen her experience. And I also want to note, and John, you also experienced it, while the EPA says 225 miles of range, when I fully charged it, the car said 260 miles. And as I was on my longer trip, I still averaged between 35 and 40 kilowatt hours per 100 miles, which actually puts it over that 225 mile range.
Yeah, I had the same experience, and basically if under 60 miles an hour, I was using maybe 75% as much battery power as I would have gasoline per mile, if you know what I mean by that. I would do a mile and it would tick down maybe 3/4 of a mile. When I got on the highway, of course, it went the other way. It started sucking up mileage at a faster rate than, but all in all, I was very impressed and never felt like I was going to run out. Jessica, I'm sorry. Did you have a chance to get in it?
No, I actually haven't. It's been a
away
hot
so much.
commodity.
Yeah, it has been a hot commodity, and you've been away.
I know. Yeah, I've been away. It's been a hot commodity, so I haven't been able to get in it. I mean, I've seen it, obviously.
Yeah.
And the color that we have is just absolutely gorgeous.
That's like the color itself, like a $5,000 option or something.
Yeah,
like that.
Neptune blue is the color. It is pretty.
It's beautiful, but no, I mean the way that they do fuel economy for the EVs is they do it's 45% highway and 55% city. So yeah, if you're doing more city driving, you're very likely going to beat any numbers that the EPA is going to get. So obviously that's a good thing. Anything over the 40 kilowatt hours is usually pretty efficient.
And speaking of that, we're going to be start using on our EV road tests the new standard, and really it's new only to the US. We're going to be talking a lot more about the number of kilowatt hours per 100 miles that are used. In Europe and most of the rest of the ways, they've been doing that with gasoline vehicles, so talking about liters or gallons per 100 miles for a long time. We don't do it in the US, but there is a new way of measuring efficiency on these electric vehicles. So Greg, let's go back to you about your over the edge. You did something for our electric special that was, I think, new even to you, wasn't it?
Yes, I had heard of people converting their gas-powered cars to all electrics. I just assumed those were the people who just kind of did this on their own. They found the parts they needed, went online, and just did it themselves. And to a degree, that's what it is like. That's still kind of what the market is, or the aftermarket is, for internal combustion cars. But this story centers around a really nice guy I met named Brandon Hollinger up in Lancaster. So Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I call it Lancaster because I guess I'm from Maryland and not Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I was very quickly corrected. It's Lancaster. So if you ever go there, don't make that mistake. Anyway, he has a business out of it now where he converts any car, basically, any internal combustion car, to an electric. Their business is called Amp-Revolt. And it started in Brandon's head 12 years ago, actually, when he just wanted to get away from gas and diesel cars and just went online, did some research, watched some YouTube videos, bought a couple like 69 60s Saabs, and converted to electric. He was driving that car. That was his daily driver every day. And that kind of like built a charge, if you will, in him. And 12 years later, he and in his downtown garage, he'll take your car and convert it. Now, the technology has changed a little bit. He started in that Saab, which he still drives, actually. He's got over 90,000 miles, all electric miles, on that Saab that he built. He converted it from the original lead acid battery to lithium. Now they use lithium batteries. But their big thing now is they are reclaiming salvaged Tesla parts and other OEMs who have electric cars, mostly Tesla, because they are, I mean, whatever you think about Tesla, they have some really, really sought after technology, really good technology. And they're taking them, repurposing the stuff that's been salvaged and putting it in, when I was there, it was like a 94 BMW 3 Series coupe. They've put them in Chevy S10s. Basically, they're doing a camper. Somebody came to them and said they want their camper to be fully electric. So they converted it to fully electric. They included DC fast charging, which was the first for them, but it also has solar panels on the roof, and it will be capable of charging itself when it's out, wherever the guy wants to take it. And as long as there's sun, it'll be able to charge itself and basically anything else he's going to use while he's camping. So I think the bigger picture of the story is that even though we're talking about all of these new EVs and they're flashy and they're awesome, I don't think it's necessarily the only way forward if you want to use or go fully electric. I mean, you can go to a guy like Brandon and say, hey, I really like my car. I like everything about it, but I want to reduce my carbon footprint. And we're at a time now where you can do that pretty easily. And actually, and you're not driving around in something that can't handle the highway. He drives his Saab to and from Pittsburgh on many occasions with plenty of highway miles in between.
I hate to ask, but what kind of cost are you talking about conversions?
It's definitely in the thousands. It's not going to be, it's not cheap. And I don't have specific pricing for you because it's obviously based on a car to car basis, because not every car is built the same. And part of that, and that kind of jumps me into something else that's very cool with Amp-Revolt, is they actually patented their own battery boxes, because you can't just take a battery that comes from a Tesla and put it into a 3 Series, because the battery in a Tesla is a flat pancake that sits under the car and it doesn't fit in a BMW. So you have to repackage those batteries. So he built a box that he can put the batteries in. It can build up and build out to whatever size they need it. It can even be put in a house for in-home storage. And that's how they do it. But that kind of, I'd love to give you an answer on exactly how much it costs. But it really depends on how they're packaging it and what parts they're using, if they have the parts and whatnot. But it probably isn't like bargain bin. Like if you're thinking like, oh, I can convert my car for just a couple $100 or a couple $1,000. It's a little more involved than that.
I have to tell you, I think we did our first segment on someone converting to electricity an existing vehicle probably back in the 80s. And it was a homegrown type of situation. And of course, then you had nothing but lead acids. I think this is very exciting. And while, we keep talking about how expensive all electric vehicles are as far as purchase price. So why not take something you love and spend that kind of money in making it, better? That's pretty interesting.
It's a larger conversation about like sustainability in general. We talk a lot about reducing our carbon footprint, and EVs are a way to do that with, not having tailpipe emissions. But you still have to build those cars, and those cars, usually that footprint is until factories are carbon neutral, that footprint is going to be similar to an internal combustion engine. And so if taking something that already exists here on the earth and, a car, say you have a bad engine or something, you spend maybe, some thousands of dollars to turn it into electric. And that honestly could be the more sustainable option than buying outright a brand new EV.
That's a really good point. Really good point. So let me stay with you, Jessica, just for the next little part of our podcast. You, as the producer of this podcast, came up with a challenge for all of us to look ahead at what's coming in EVs. Our special pretty much looked at what was available now, but over the next couple of years, we're going to be actually swamped with just dozens and dozens of all new battery electric plug-in vehicles, not even plug-in hybrids. There'll be plenty of them too. But
right.
I'm going to ask you and then ask Greg, and then I'll make a comment. Of all the stuff that is coming, what EV, fully electric, battery electric vehicle are you most looking forward to? And if it happens to be a plug-in hybrid, that's fine too.
I have to say, I think Rivian to me is probably the most, the one I'm looking forward to the most. Both, they have the, I guess the R1T is a mid-size pickup. So they have a mid-size pickup, but that same platform is also going to be used for the R1S, which is a larger SUV. So those two could vary. The R1T is in production now. That's going to be the first mass-produced EV pickup coming, and I think the look is just really fantastic. I mean, obviously, you take a look at it, and it's got some funkiness to it. Its headlights are like rounded and it's a little off, but not off enough that, in like the bubbly way that EVs used to be. You're like, that's probably not an internal combustion engine vehicle, but you're not like, that's a weird looking car. Like very attractive. They seem to have thought of everything. It just seems like that Rivian is going to propel the larger the vehicles that, the real gas guzzlers, to start thinking more in terms of electric. So yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to seeing more of those on the road.
And by the time we folks are hearing this podcast, I'll have had a chance to get into the Rivian pickup. So maybe on the next podcast, we can talk about that. It does look pretty darn impressive, and it will beat Ford to the market with the first all-electric mass-produced pickup truck. So, Greg, all the upcoming EVs, what are you looking forward to most?
Yeah, I think Jessica kind of took the low-hanging fruit there.
Oh,
Well, no, I mean that as in I was going to also take that fruit, but now I have to
Okay.
reach a little bit higher, just slightly though, and just say the F-150. Not only because it is going to be an all-electric pickup truck, but because of what the truck is in America. It's not just the best-selling pickup truck, it is the best-selling vehicle.
Period.
So
Yep.
the fact that it is now going to be offer a full electric version, I think is just, it'll be interesting to see the acceptance of it, not obviously the performance and the execution, but I just think it's a very big moment in the US auto industry when the best-selling vehicle has an all-electric version and it's a work vehicle.
And not only can you tow with it, although they're not being very cagey about how far, the thing that gets me about the F-150, and I don't want to hog this either, is you will be able to use it in an emergency to power your house. Not only power your job site if you're working with it, but to physically plug it into your house. And instead of having a portable generator or even a big generator attached to your house. So that's pretty cool to me.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I sort of, when I drove the F-150 hybrid for the first time, talked to the engineers about, and I was like, this seems like any vehicle that can act as a generator. I was like, this is, seems like it would be great in any sort of emergency situation. And then
Right.
of course it's an F-150. So say a federal agency needs something like that, seems like it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can only use it for a certain period of time, but it gives you a bridge until you get a more sustainable power source.
Yeah.
Okay, my turn. I've picked something pretty far out. I'm looking very forward to the first vehicles supposedly sold here next year by a car company we've never seen in the US before, and that's VinFast. VinFast, for people that are not familiar, is from Vietnam. They are a new company, but they're already the fourth largest car maker or I should say, as far as market share selling in Vietnam. They're talking about being here next spring. They'll have two crossover SUVs, a compact and a mid-size, the VFE 35 and VFE 36. To me, because of the Vietnamese sourcing, I expect these to undercut everybody else on the market. So I'm all about, let's get these vehicles, all electric battery vehicles, down to extremely affordable areas. Take a page out of the Nissan Leaf book, and let's get the base models down to under $30,000 before you have any kind of incentives. And I don't know if these guys will do it, but they've certainly got an option. And the VFE 35 being the smaller one, I'm expecting that to be, if not the least expensive fully battery electric vehicle you can buy in the US, down there with the lowest cost. And so we don't know anything about quality or anything else, but they are doing well in their home country, and we'll see what happens with them. And all of this kind of gets us into our lightning round. And this is a very interesting poll. A new consumer survey carried out by Mini USA finds that half of all consumers expect the American automotive market to be mostly electric within just 15 years. Do you think that perception is realistic? Also, 80% of those surveyed will also consider an electric vehicle, a plug-in electric, as their primary or secondary vehicle. What do you think? Realistic?
I didn't read the full blurb on the survey, but are we talking fully electric or electrified? Because there's a difference there.
Jessica, you came up with this, so you can chime in, but I looked at all the details too, and I'm not sure they were made as specific.
I feel like the general perception is fully electric. If I was getting that, I would say fully electric,
well,
but I could be wrong.
I'm going where Greg's going. Go ahead, Greg.
I'm totally speculating, but in my anecdotal experience talking with people who aren't in the auto industry, there's still a lot of confusion about what a plug-in hybrid is versus what an EV is. I think
Correct.
Most people think of electrified, they hear the word electric, they assume it is fully electric. We know that's not the case, but I'm going to guess that most people in the survey hear electrification and think fully electric. So I do not, in that vein, I do not think we'll be there in 15 years. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot to happen in 15 years. Now, if we're talking strictly electrified, where we're talking plug-in hybrids, just standard hybrids and electrics, I think that's easily doable.
Yeah.
Jessica.
I agree with Greg. I also think that answer could change in 5 years too. The technology gets better and better every single day. So 5 years from now, we could be seeing it almost normal to have a 500-mile range in an EV, potentially, or that on the on the horizon, higher ranges, faster charging, greener energy. We could, within 5 to 10 years, anything can really happen. But certainly at the pace that we're at now, I do think it's a little bit of a long shot to say in 15 years, mostly everything on sale or out there is going to be all electric.
It also means there are also enough words in here that you don't really, they could be right and wrong at the same time. Mostly could mean 51%. If you're talking 51% basically electric, of course, in 15 years.
Mhm.
I've always thought the 2050, 2045, 2050 is more realistic. The other thing, though, that popped out when I looked at this survey, which they didn't really talk that much about in some of the articles about it, was that almost 80%, and this is sort of counterintuitive to what their results were, while 80% of the people, they say they would consider an electric vehicle, they had almost as many that said they don't think electric vehicles would fit into their daily lifestyle seamlessly. And that really came down to range and charging convenience. So everybody would like to go electric, but show me something that in an emergency, I can basically, drive a couple 100 miles without having to stop for an hour. So there's a lot more education that has to happen. And I do believe, though, what you said, Jessica, I think in 5 years from now, the landscape is going to look a lot different because as we saw in our EV special, Electrify America and other charging networks are rapidly developing and getting ready to deploy charging infrastructure that will cut the time down to recharge a vehicle on the highway almost to what the time it takes to get to take a bathroom break and fill up your car at a gas station. It's going to be closer than you think in 5 years. So, and that's going to change everybody's opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. One of the things I'll sort of circle back a little bit to the C40 recharger that I drove is that once you get into it, you see how it works. You see, Volvo has also been partnering with Google for their most recent models. They're updating their model lineup, and so they've been using literally Google Maps within their infotainment, and the way in which the car knows exactly how much charge it needs. If you want to map out where you need to go, right. All these EVs are smart. They know exactly how much battery you're going to have. They're going to know what charger that you need to stop at. Do you need to start, and where and how long you need to stop there for. So I think a lot of perception has to change. And I think if people sat in an EV and they drove one and they saw how it works, I think their minds would be a little bit more at ease with the whole idea of range anxiety. And so, but it's just one of those things that, a lot of people just don't have the opportunity to physically be in one and drive one and experience it.
Yeah. My very last point will just be, I get the hesitation, but to compare it to something we've seen happen, there was a lot of questions about when we started the pandemic. How do we transport things? How do we make things with all these restrictions? How do we work from home? And I mean, we did a pretty darn good job, and we still are. So I think we, as humans and as Americans specifically, we're pretty good at figuring some stuff out. I'm not just saying that as like, hey, we'll do it, don't worry about it. I mean that I have faith that we are very capable of figuring out any future problems.
Very well said, indeed. both
Yeah.
of you. That's a good final point. And here's a very interesting comment from one of our viewers. Our viewer question from Mike. And Mike, I'll tell you right off the bat, we love you, man. After watching your informative and wonderful show on a Saturday, I have decided to sell all of my gasoline vehicles, including my 1970 SS Chevrolet and mint condition Z06 Vet, and go fully electric. My concern prior to buying in is how much is the electric cost of charging going to be? Who would like to take first crack at that?
I did some math for
Good.
this. So John had mentioned that when we talk about efficiency of an EV, we talk about kilowatt hours per 100 miles, and that is essentially like miles per gallon. But of course, the conversions aren't exactly quite as handy. There's more math involved. So if you can imagine, if you do most of your charging at home, there is a way that you can calculate how much it might cost, how much it might add to your electric bill per year or even per month or something like that, depending on what vehicle you buy. So for example, I took the ID4, the Volkswagen ID4, which has an efficiency of 35 kilowatt hours per 100 miles. So kind of mid-grade between efficiencies, not the most efficient, which the most efficient I believe right now is Tesla, which I think is 24 kilowatt hours per 100 miles. But anyway, so you can just take out your most recent electric bill and you'll see on there how much you are paying per kilowatt hour. So I took out mine and I pay 8 cents per kilowatt hour, 8 cent, 833, whatever it is. So if you take the 35 kilowatt hours and you multiply that by the 8 cents and some change, it ends up being, for me, $2.92 per 100 miles. So it cost me just under $3 to put 100 miles into the tank. And then if you really want to get crazy and be like, oh, well, how much per year would that cost me? Say I drive 8,000 miles per year. I take the $2.92, multiply that by 8,000, and then divide that number by 100 for the 100 miles. And then you get $233.60 per year. That's how much it would cost me. So it sounds like a lot of math, I know. But it's just one of those things that it also depends on where you live. I pay less in electricity than somebody, say, in Arizona or California. But that's also the same with gas prices. I pay less in, gas than somebody in California does. And of course, Greg and John would probably know more of this than I do. But you're going to be paying a little bit of a premium when it comes to charging in a public charging network. So with Electrify America on a level 2 charger. But yeah, that's sort of the basics. You can calculate it yourself. But yeah.
Greg.
Yeah, I was just going to offer more anecdotal evidence just because that's what I'm doing today. I'm all about the anecdotes. I fast charged our Taycan, and I have the picture right here of what the final numbers, and this will always vary. Like Jessica says, it depends. So I got 52 kilowatt hours in 31 minutes and 41 seconds. And this is with an Electrify America charging station with I believe a little bit of a discount for having an account. And it was $16.12 plus another 2 cents for tax. So if you're going to be doing a lot of fast charging or charging at public places where they do charge you, that is something to consider because fast charging is considerably more expensive.
I came up with basically, I think the fast charging from my experience has been priced because there's not that much competition right now at about the level of a premium gallon of gasoline. So I find fast charging in my experience so far, pretty much on par with putting premium gas in the vehicle and about the same cost. However, Jessica's point, at home, depending on where you live, it may be anywhere from a third to a half to 3/4 as expensive per mile as using gasoline. So the more charging you do at home, the more money you're going to save. And I got asked recently on an interview, what's the payback time? You're looking probably, depending on the premium you pay for the vehicle, whether it's something like a Nissan Leaf or something far more expensive, 5 to 7 years for the payback. And of course, if gas prices keep going up, it'll be less. So I hope, Mike, that kind of gives you some parameters. I think Jessica's answer was really a really good one. And really all you need is just take out that electric bill of yours and know what your vehicle's kilowatt hours per 100 miles is and go to town. It's not as daunting a mathematical situation. Before we wrap things up, I want to go back, and Greg, I'll start with you this time, to the question I posed to all of you at the beginning. We talked about upcoming EVs, what we're looking forward to, but looking at what you can get now as an internal combustion engine vehicle, what vehicle would you most like to be made into a fully battery electric, and why? So why don't you start?
Because I'm scared of commitment. I don't want to commit to just one answer. So my practical, what should be an EV, like what in my head is built to be an EV. I would say the Hyundai Santa Cruz, that compact pickup truck. I just feel like, to me, that should be an EV. But as an enthusiast, as someone who likes to drive, I'd like to see like an all electric Miata or maybe a Cayman, something like that. Just, rip around in a 2-door, 2-seater. All electric. I would surely miss the sound of a flat 6, or Miatas have never had like great sounding engines. So I don't think you would miss it that much in a Miata, but I think they could be a lot of fun.
Jessica.
Well, my answer is probably opposite of that. Well, I have a Wrangler. I would love to see just a full BEV Wrangler. They exist. Technically, the Jeep made a concept last year at their Easter Jeep Safari. It was actually a manual electric Wrangler, which is really cool. But yeah, I mean, you see a lot of those things on the road, and I know it would be a challenge to get that into production, considering it's probably one of the least aerodynamic vehicles out there. But I would absolutely love to see an EV Wrangler. And I have half a thought to, one day convert my Wrangler to EV, when its time comes.
Well, there you go. You do the amp fold. You're talking about the Jeep Wrangler Magneto or Magnetico. Magneto EV.
Yeah.
I think they've hinted strongly it's going to be in production next year.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I get nervous when they say things with the whole chip shortage,
Yeah. Oh, that's true. That's true.
They say next year, but you might be able to put some money down on one, but we'll see when we see it.
I found an interesting comment just the other day that where a normal car takes about 300 chips, an EV can take up to 3,000. So it's like 10 times as many chips. It makes the chip shortage even worse. My choice is going to basically be almost the same as Greg's. I want to see the new Ford Maverick in a full EV. And where I'm coming from is I have an older Ford Ranger. So I've got a compact truck. I never use it for long trips. I run back and forth to Home Depot and Lowe's. It carries mulch. I'd love to see something that size that doesn't have to have 300 miles worth of range in a useful vehicle. That to me is like the perfect EV for my household, at least at this moment. So I'm with you, Greg. Small pickup truck with all battery.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's been a lot to cover in our EV special add-on podcast. But as we close out, any rant and raves from anybody about anything that's bothering you since we did our last podcast?
I have a rave.
Okay.
Well, I was in Belgium, driving the C40 Recharge, and that was the first time I'd ever driven in Europe. And I don't know what it was about their roads, but there was something that it just made sense. Like the traffic patterns.
Smoothness, but
traffic circles.
Yes. Roundabouts. There were no potholes. Even the bikers were nice. There was bikes everywhere and they were so nice. I didn't feel like I was gonna get hit by one like I do when I drive in New York.
Right.
And it like, yeah, everybody was just like considerate and kind. And I was very at ease driving in traffic in Belgium.
Competency.
Yes.
Competency. And yeah, I agree with you. Greg, anything on your chest?
Yeah, I'll rant about people who don't like traffic circles. Traffic circles are great. I don't know why everybody hates them so much in America. They're great if you know how to do them properly. Just take 5 minutes and read a quick couple sentences on how to handle it, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
You know, I do find that Europeans are just more, I don't know what the word is. Competency just comes to me because they have to pass a driving test in Europe is a lot more involved than passing one here. They don't just consider it a right. And so when you are over there and you are driving extensively and you will get into tough spots and you will get into extremely fast traffic, but people just don't tend to pull out in front of you. They don't tend to take their aggression out while driving, at least in my experience. So it's interesting, Jessica, this was your first time and you came back with very similar impressions. So.
Yeah, I mean, it probably helped or didn't. I don't know if it helped or didn't help that I think the week before I was in New York City driving. And so like in the city driving and that, you know, cars double parked everywhere, people just walking everywhere. So this was like a very welcome change.
Yeah, well, don't get used to it. All right, everybody. Our digital producer, Jessica Ray, and also our podcast producer today. Thank you very much for all of your comments. Our Over the Edge reporter, Greg Carlos, as always, great contributor, and to the folks behind the scene, our audio engineer, Jim Bigwood, our podcast creator, Bob Mixter, and everybody out there, thanks very much for tuning into our podcast today. As for where you can watch MotorWeek, the television series, if you've got a screen, you can find us. Public television stations. You can go to our motorweek.org website, pull down about the show up in the corner, put in your zip code or your state, and you'll pop up where we're seen there. Our new cable partner, MAV TV. Go to mavtv.com for our schedule. They air us lots of times over the week. You can also go, as we're always plugging on the show, over to pbs.org/motorweek. Excuse me. And you can stream us for free. And we encourage all those people that stream to do that instead of paying somebody a lot of money to watch us. Anyway, if you've got a screen, you can watch MotorWeek. Thanks very much, everyone. Until next time, I'm John Davis, and thanks for being a part of MotorWeek.
You've been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Lucas Oil and TireRack.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.